Argument number 6. What about the non-blacks who live in poverty? So it's important first of all, I want to say I'm a Life Path 11 Libra. Thank you for watching this video. I'm a Life Path 11 Libra. I'm more important than anything, it's important to know that I have a significant amount of 5 energy in my charts, in my numerology. So I have a 55 actually in my numerology. So it's a powerful humanitarian vibration. So I care about all people. And it's something I can't help. I don't want to see anybody suffer, on this planet. And it's a planet of abundance. Okay, but black people's hell has been other people's heaven on earth. And we're in the 3rd dimension, right? So let's get into this argument, which is another deflection tactic to not address black issues. Black people stand up and show out for other people. We don't get this, a lot of times don't get the same treatment in some ways. So again, I'm not like that, but we'll continue on. So examining the racial wealth divide, and of course we're at the kmtcminds.blogspot.com website. First of all, I want to say make sure you check out the resources on the left-hand side of the page. And we're going to talk about this comment that was left on a video that I made. And I appreciate this comment because, getting different perspectives is important for, analyzing where we are, where we stand in terms of the economic pyramid that we live in. Okay. Well, many of the wealth and resources is funneled to the top. So the racial wealth gap should be a great blog post. So let's look into this further. And it's an excellent argument from my viewer. This is a good thing about YouTube is you get different perspectives from different people. It can kind of give you a wider scope than just black and white. But people come over here and classify themselves as white, which is why people take a look at these particular things. So here's one comment from the video that I received, which was interesting. And I'll gladly, go to work on the comment, by the way, because he told me to go to work and stop whining. So, okay, well, let me go to work on this comment then. All right. So what is your point? First, the short video was not attack, and I did this short video on the 1968 wealth gap. It's a short. The short video was not an attack on white people, but a data highlight. My intuition tells me it was taken as an attack video due to the derogatory and condescending nature of the reply, which is a thing that I've experienced when interacting with certain people. Okay, this condescending tone that they have, and that, I'm not gonna say this is a white person, but we'll continue on. So response, the title of the video initially was the 1968 wealth gap between black and white families. So the short was to highlight the disparities back then. Okay, now I want to talk about condescending for a second. Many a times this also comes up when black people are in the workplace. Okay, this always keeping this tone of you're less than me, right? This white supremacist type of tone of you're less than me. You know what I'm saying? You're always going to be less than me. It's a psychological form of warfare. Okay? And so now, point 2, the difference reflects that in the U.S., there are many more millionaires amongst whites than blacks. Okay? That's point 2. So he's saying that basically because there's more millionaires in the white community than black people, that's what causes some of the difference, basically. And, of course, I disagree with that one. I can look at the metric of white millionaires and study that more, go into exactly how these people have, become millionaires and, how big of a role, what percentage of white people are millionaires versus non-millionaires. From what I've read, one article said 1 out of 7 is a millionaire in terms of net worth or wealth. So my response is, but of course, again, I want to say there is the hidden wealth statistics of how usually if it's a white man and a black man and they get the same charge, and most of the time the black man is going to get a longer sentence, right? That's something that's a fact, right? On average. So there's hidden wealth. You get legal wealth, right? Certain legal loopholes, things of that nature, and that's the hidden side. But anyways, The difference in wealth is not only that there are millionaires amongst whites, which is true, but the generational wealth transfer that black families were left out of, stolen labor, opportunities that were historically stolen leading up to the 1968 wealth gap, which I highlighted in the video, which was why the Fair Housing Act was fought for during the Civil Rights era. Post-emancipation promises and failures. So Juneteenth in 1865 marked the beginning of what was supposed to be an era of black wealth creation, right? Free African Americans and of course black Americans, foundational black Americans, after suffering institutionalized theft during slavery, were now free to earn, own property, and build wealth. However, the racial wealth gap persisted and grew over time, a result of continuous discrimination thwarted economic opportunities. Okay. Despite the end of slavery, which everyone loves to point to, slavery's over with. Nobody owned slaves. The banks that some of y'all bank at owned slaves and apologized, as I highlighted previously. So despite the end of slavery and the civil rights achievements, black Americans faced new forms of discrimination that impeded wealth accumulation. Okay. In 1863, black Americans owned a mere 0.5% of national wealth, a figure that had only marginally improved over a century later. And that source is from history. E.T. All, which is my sources, are at the bottom of this page. So the black-white wealth gap over time, research by Darren Noncourt, Kim Kuhn, and Schulerick, shows the wealth gap between white and black Americans. They use historical census data, state tax records, and consumer finance surveys to construct a consistent measure of wealth by race. The white to black per capita wealth ratio decreased in the years immediately following emancipation, but remained significantly disproportionate. Starting from virtually nothing, blacks saw their wealth rise faster than whites initially. Okay, this is we talk about during an era where our families were more together. And I have to do a special report on, details over what really broke down the black family. It was a myriad of things outside the black community, but there are some key things that happen within it too. Okay, so still, systemic barriers and exclusion from wealth-building policies like the Homestead Act and the GI Bill, of course, those huge, hundreds of millions of acres of land grants, contributed to the wealth gap. And that source is Darren Noncourt. Okay. Historical policies in the racial wealth gap. Okay, so a piece from the St. Louis Fed discusses the historical context of the racial wealth gap. It highlights how black Americans were often excluded from significant wealth building policies such as the 1862 Homestead Act and the GI Bill of 1944. Additionally, the destruction of black wealth during events like the Tulsa Race Massacre and the failure of promises like the 40 acres and a mule pledge significantly contributed to the wealth gap. Okay, these historical factors underscored how systemic biases and structural barriers, rather than individual choices, have shaped the racial wealth gap in America. Point 3, what are the same numbers for blacks in comparison to Jews, Asians, gays, Persians, Arabs who live in America? So I calculated, what I did was take some of the best sources I could find on the racial wealth of everyone else compared to one another in terms of other sources, right? I thought that would be an interesting data science project, was to look at LGBTQ, Jewish, Asian, Arab, Persian, and, of course, white people. Obviously, I'm sure the person that commented would have preferred that maybe I'd have kept, white people out of the statistic, but just for comparison purposes and reference, I included them. But right now, Asians are the leaders right now. And, of course, the stats I show, I've seen a mixture of different stats. I've seen some stats say as high as they have about $289,000 in net worth on average, but 280 something thousand was about the range for white people. Persians was there, but let me go to the other chart that I sorted. So I sorted all of the data from the least to greatest, right? So we have black people, Persians, LGBTQ, Jewish, Indian, white, and Asian as the leaders, okay? And so this is a wealth by nationality chart. Very important chart to get the picture of, what's going on here. Because, you don't really hear Indians talked about with a lot of charts. A lot of charts will show you just black, white, and maybe Latino, right? So I just thought, well, let me include some other groups in there, see what information I could find. And of course, I left all my sources at the bottom of this page here. And you can check that information out for yourself. Okay, so let's go back. And let's talk about this argument a little bit further. We don't want to leave anybody out, right? We should live in an equitable society where everybody can do well, right? But what many times Black Americans find is that even with the alternative media, the so-called truthers, there's some truthers out there, but a lot of them are on code against Black Americans, especially Black truthers, okay? They're definitely not for reparations, some of the most well-known truthers that you know.